No one showed up for Isaiah Cole's 50th birthday. Not his board members. Not the men who called him brother in front of cameras. Not a single one of the 300 guests who said yes. At 7 o'clock, the ballroom of the Ashford Grand glowed under gold light. A 5-tier cake stood untouched in the center of the room. 300 empty chairs faced a stage, where a live orchestra kept playing to no one. And in the middle of it all, a man in a wheelchair stared at the door. Waiting, still waiting. By 8, his assistant stopped reading him the text out loud. She just held the phone against her chest and looked at the floor. Isaiah Cole had built a company worth $12 billion. He had put thousands of people through college. He had paid off homes, paid off surgeries, paid off debts nobody else even knew existed. And on the one night he needed someone in the room with him, the room was empty. Then, at 8:40, the ballroom doors opened. A woman in a plain gray coat stood in the doorway. A boy, maybe 10 years old, held her hand. She carried a small paper gift bag, wrinkled at the edges like it had been opened, and closed a dozen times, deciding whether to come at all. She had no invitation. Nobody knew her name. But what she was about to give Isaiah Cole would matter more than every gift in that room combined, and it would break him wide open in front of everyone still left to see it. If you believe that real loyalty has nothing to do with money, hit like right now and subscribe to this channel, because tonight's story is going to remind you exactly who the people are that matter. Now let's go back to where this all started. Isaiah Cole was not born into money. He was born in a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, raised by a mother who cleaned office buildings at night and a father who fixed washing machines during the day. He grew up doing homework on a fold-out table while the smell of bleach drifted up through the floor vents. His mother used to tell him one thing over and over, like it was scripture. Baby, it doesn't matter how high you climb. If you forget where you came from, you'll fall from higher than anybody. He never forgot it. By 26, Isaiah had built a small logistics software company out of a rented office with 3 folding chairs and 1 working printer. By 35, that company had become one of the largest tech firms on the East Coast. By 40, his name was in magazines, Billionaire, lists, keynote stages. But the people who worked for him remembered something different about Isaiah Cole. They remembered that he knew the security guards by name, that he remembered birthdays of people who cleaned his building, that he quietly covered medical bills for employees who never asked him to, that when a warehouse worker's daughter needed surgery, the bill vanished and nobody ever found out who paid it. He never announced it, never let PR touch it, never let it become a headline. To Isaiah, kindness wasn't strategy. It was just how a person was supposed to move through the world. Then, 2 years before his 50th birthday, everything changed in less than 4 seconds. A truck ran a red light on a rain-soaked evening. Isaiah's car spun twice before it hit the guardrail. He survived. His spine did not. The doctors told him, gently, the way doctors do when they know the words will break something in a person. He would never walk again. The physical pain was brutal. Months of therapy, learning how to lift himself, learning how to live inside a body that no longer obeyed him. But the hardest part wasn't the wheelchair. It was watching people disappear. Board members who once fought for a seat next to him at dinner suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Old friends stopped returning calls. Executives began speaking to his assistant instead of to him, like his mind had been paralyzed along with his legs. He still ran his company, still closed deals, still had the sharpest instincts in the boardroom. But the moment the meetings ended, the silence followed him home. Birthdays hurt the most. His mother used to make them feel enormous, even when there was barely enough money for store-bought cake. She'd light the candles, turn off every light in the apartment, and say the same thing every year. A birthday isn't about presents, baby. It's proof that your life is a gift to somebody. She passed 6 years before the accident. He kept her words in a drawer in his mind, and every year on his birthday, he opened that drawer whether he wanted to or not. So when his assistant, Renata, suggested a party for his 50th, something big, something at the Ashford Grand, Isaiah agreed. Not because he wanted the size of it, because he wanted proof that he still mattered to somebody. Renata sent out over 300 invitations. Board members, old friends, business, partners, employees he had personally promoted over the years. Almost everyone said yes. He requested his mother's favorite flowers, white lilies, lining every table. He asked for a live jazz trio because she used to hum jazz while she ironed his father's work shirts on Sunday nights. For 2 weeks, it felt like something good was coming. Then the cancellations started. One executive had a family emergency. Another had a flight delay that conveniently happened 3 days in a row. A board member didn't even bother with an excuse, just 3 words. Can't make it. By 6 that evening, half the guest list had dropped. By 7, 3/4. At 7:30, Isaiah asked Renata how many people were confirmed. She didn't answer right away. Renata. She looked up, eyes wet. Mr. Cole, it's 0. Isaiah nodded slowly, like a man absorbing a punch he'd been expecting for months. He turned toward the wall of windows overlooking the city, the skyline glittering like it was, celebrating something just not him, and something inside him quietly, without sound, cracked down the middle. He had spent 30 years surrounded by people. That night, for the first time, he understood that being surrounded was never the same thing as being loved. Across the city, in a neighborhood the Ashford Grand's guests would never drive through. Maya Ellison was finishing her second job of the day. At 31, Maya worked mornings at a billing office and evenings doing deliveries for a courier service. She was raising her 10-year-old son, Elias, alone. His father had left before. Elias turned 2 and never came back. Maya's mother, Denise, had spent over 2 decades cleaning offices, including for 11 of those years, the headquarters of Cole Industries. Denise never talked about Isaiah Cole like he was some untouchable billionaire. She talked about him like he was a decent man who happened to have money. He remembers people, she used to say. You'd be surprised how rare that is at the top. Years earlier, Maya had been pregnant, exhausted, and one signature away from dropping out of her bookkeeping certification program. Elias's father was gone. Child care cost more than she made in a week. She was 3 days from quitting school entirely. Denise never asked Isaiah for anything in 15 years of working there. But one night, Isaiah found her asleep in the employee break room at 2 a.m., baby Elias in a carrier beside her, because Maya was in a night class and had nowhere else to leave him. Isaiah didn't make a scene, didn't call anyone over. He just asked quietly what was going on. 2 days later, Maya's tuition for her final semester was fully covered through the company's Employee Family Assistance Fund. A reliable daycare spot opened up for Elias. Paid in full, no explanation given. Isaiah never brought it up again. But because of it, Maya finished her certification, found steady work, built something stable. For her son, one paycheck at a time. Denise passed away the year before Isaiah's 50th birthday. Before she died, she handed Maya an old, worn envelope she kept folded in her Bible for over a decade. Inside was a note, handwritten in Isaiah's own hand. No mother should have to choose between her child's future and her own. Take care of that, baby. The rest will work itself out. Maya read that note more times than she could count. On nights when the bills piled up. On nights when she wondered if she was failing her son. It reminded her that one quiet decision from one decent man had changed the entire direction of her family's life. That evening, the same evening as Isaiah's birthday, Maya's last delivery of the night, happened to be at the Ashford Grand Hotel. She wasn't there for the party. She had no idea it was even happening. But as she walked past the ballroom with a small gift bag she'd meant to drop off with hotel staff for a completely different reason, she saw it. Untouched cake, empty chairs, staff quietly clearing food no one had eaten. Is there a wedding that got canceled or something? Elias asked, tugging her sleeve. Maya looked through the open doors, and there he was, Isaiah Cole, sitting alone in his wheelchair, hands folded in his lap, eyes fixed on a point on the floor that wasn't really there. The hotel manager, who recognized Maya from her delivery route, sighed. It's Mr. Cole's 50th birthday. Every single guest canceled. We're about to end it early. Maya stood frozen for a moment. She thought about her mother. She thought about the folded note in her Bible. She thought about a man who had quietly rewritten her family's future and never once asked for a thank you. Then Elias whispered something that stopped her cold. "Mom, I think he's trying not to cry." Maya looked down at the small paper bag in her hand. It wasn't much. A homemade card Elias had drawn that afternoon for an entirely different reason, and a small tablet she'd borrowed from her billing office. One she'd spent 2 weeks quietly filling with something she never expected to actually need tonight. She asked the manager if she and Elias could go inside, just for 5 minutes. He hesitated, looked at the empty ballroom, looked at the man sitting alone in it. Then he nodded. When the doors opened again, every staff member left in that ballroom turned to look. Isaiah lifted his head slowly. He had stopped expecting anyone. Then he saw her, a woman he didn't recognize, walking toward him with a young boy at her side. He sat up a little straighter. Old habit. Still a man who greeted people properly, even on the worst night of his adult life. Maya stopped a few feet from his chair. Elias held tight to her hand. "Mr. Cole," she said quietly, "you don't know me, but you knew my mother, Denise Ellison." Something shifted behind Isaiah's eyes. "Denise," he repeated, like the name had unlocked a door in his memory. "The night cleaner, from the old building on 9th. Maya's eyes filled instantly. "Yes, she talked about you for years." He asked, almost afraid of the answer, "Is she dash?" "She passed away last spring." Grief moved across his face, slow and real. "She was a good woman," he said. "She kept everybody else's world clean and never once asked anybody to notice her own." Maya set the small paper bag on the table beside him. "My mother kept a note you wrote her for over 10 years, she said. About me, about my. So, you helped us when you had absolutely nothing to gain from it. You probably thought it was small. It wasn't. It changed everything. I cannot let you sit in this room tonight, thinking that nobody remembers who you are." Elias stepped forward and held out his card, crayon stars, a lopsided drawing of a birthday cake, blue and gold marker bleeding slightly through the paper. On the front, "Happy birthday, Mr. Isaiah." Inside, in careful 10-year-old handwriting, "My mom says good people should never have to be alone." Isaiah covered his mouth with one hand. Behind him, Renata turned away, wiping her eyes with the back of her wrist. Even the hotel manager looked down at the floor, unable to hold his composure. But Maya wasn't finished. She pulled the small tablet from the bag and asked the manager if it could be connected to the ballroom's projector. A minute later, the lights dimmed, and the massive screen at the front of the empty ballroom came to life. The first face on the screen was a woman in her 60s, a former security guard from Cole Industries' original headquarters. "Mr. Cole, you paid for my son's chemotherapy when my insurance dropped it without ever telling me you did it. I found out by accident 3 years later. I never got to say thank you. I'm saying it now." The next face was a young man, maybe 25, in a warehouse uniform. "You promoted me from the loading dock to logistics manager because you noticed I was staying late to study for my certification. Nobody else in that building noticed anything about me. You did. Then a cafeteria worker. Then a former intern, now an engineer. Then a delivery driver. Then a single father who used to work maintenance. Then a woman who had cleaned Cole Industries' offices for over a decade. A friend of Denise's, speaking through tears about a decency she said this world doesn't make enough of anymore. 43 messages in total. None of them wore expensive suits. None had ever ridden in his private elevator. None had ever sat at his table. But every single one of them remembered Isaiah Cole. Not the billionaire, the man. By the time the video ended, Isaiah was crying without trying to hide it, understanding all that. Once that the good he thought had vanished from his life had never actually vanished at all. It had just kept living quietly, invisibly, inside the lives of people who never stopped carrying it. He looked at Maya, at Elias. "I spent this whole evening waiting for people who liked what I could do for them," he said, voice breaking. "You brought me the people I actually did something for. Maya shook her head gently. No, Mr. Cole. We didn't bring you people. We brought you the truth. That night, the hotel staff stopped clearing the tables. The chef relit every candle on the untouched cake. The jazz trio, who had been quietly packing up their instruments, sat back down and started to play. Renata invited every staff member still on shift to stay for a slice of cake. Servers, housekeepers, cooks, security, delivery drivers who happened to still be in the lobby. For the first time all night, the ballroom felt full. Not because it was filled with powerful people, because it was filled with people who chose, on their own, without an invitation, to be there. The next morning, Isaiah arrived at his office with a different kind of clarity in his eyes, the kind that only comes after a night that rearranges something permanently inside a person. He called an emergency meeting with his executive team. This company, he told them, is not measured by the people who show up when the cameras are rolling. It is measured by the people who show up when nobody is watching, and nobody is going to know they did. He announced that same week the launch of the Ellison Fund, a program dedicated to funding emergency childcare, education grants for single parents, accessible workplace, redesigns, and mentorship for young people coming from nothing the way he once had. He asked Maya to help lead it, not as a symbol for a press release, as a paid advisor, because her life experience would shape every decision the fund made better than any consultant in the building ever could. Maya hesitated. She had never sat in a boardroom in her life. She didn't own a single blazer. She was still juggling 2 jobs, bedtime stories, and a mountain of bills that never seemed to shrink. Isaiah looked at her and said the only thing that mattered. You walked into a room everyone else abandoned. That's not something you learn in business school. That's leadership. Months later, the Ellison Fund had already helped hundreds of families, childcare grants, adaptive workplace equipment, tuition support, mentorship pairings that changed the direction of entire households. On Isaiah's desk, next to contracts and quarterly reports, sat one thing that never moved. A slightly bent card, blue and gold crayon fading at the folds. Good people should never have to be alone. Whenever a decision got hard, he read it again. The following year, Isaiah's 51st birthday was held in the same ballroom at the Ashford Grand. This time, the tables were full. Parents who had gone back to school. Workers who had recovered from accidents with the fund support. Kids who had found mentors for the first time in their lives. Employees who had become something closer to family. Maya and Elias stood near Isaiah as the cake was brought out. 5 tiers, same as the year before, except this time, every chair in the room had someone in it. Before anyone started singing, Isaiah looked around the room and smiled. I used to think success meant being surrounded by important people, he said, his voice steady now, no longer breaking the way it had a year earlier. Now I know the people who actually matter are the ones who show up when they have absolutely nothing to gain from it. The room erupted in applause, and Isaiah understood, finally and completely, that the greatest gift of his entire life hadn't come wrapped in gold paper, and it hadn't been delivered by anyone powerful. It had arrived in a wrinkled paper bag, carried by a single mother who refused to let another human being sit alone in an empty room and believe he had been forgotten. If this story moved you, write kindness always shows up in the comments below. Like this video, share it with somebody who needs to hear it today, and subscribe because stories like this one are exactly why this channel exists.